everyone. We have with us Ms. Ekta Baid. She's a partner with Samvad Partners and is a partner in charge of the Hyderabad office of the firm. She's a corporate commercial lawyer who has a significant experience in corporate restructuring, insolvency, private equity, and M&A. She has substantial industry-specific experience in the areas of healthcare and life sciences, information technology, and infrastructure, with special emphasis on road and power sectors. She is a qualified mediator and is also recognized practitioner featured by Chambers Asia Pacific and also by Legal 500. Hello, Ekta, and welcome to CMC's Dialogue on Mediation.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Lovely to speaking to all of you.
With pleasure, ma'am. Technically, we are beginning to crawl out of the lockdown with this unlock one. And every one of us has suffered a loss in some or the other way, be it a migrant labor or a top-notch business professional. So this pandemic has hit us hard with long-lasting effects on the economy, healthcare system, and various commercial and non-commercial activities. For the first time, the country's courts were not functioning and later picked up on to the virtual system after shying away for these many years. Investors and companies have been calling on force majeure and material breach clauses in contracts. All businesses are encountering similar or various other challenges across the globe. Many disputes are arising and many more are on the horizon. The pandemic and the subsequent unprecedented nationwide lockdown changed the way we look at conflicts and our justice system. Now, as a lawyer, law firm partner, and a mediator, you must have come across unexpected situations and inquiries from your clients. What was your experience of dealing with legal disputes when the country was in a lockdown? And what kind of inquiries did you receive?
So I would actually bucket, it's a very interesting time, and it actually threw on lots of legal issues and challenges, not just to lawyers, but also to parties itself from their commercial transactions. And I would actually put them into two buckets. One is where you actually have issues with respect to disputes, where you're looking at a force majeure clause, where one party is trying to enforce its rights. The second one was actually in terms of challenges where we've not yet reached across the bridge of dealing with situations. I'll give you a classic example, which happened in a lot of transactions. You had your binding transaction agreement signed for both private equity and M&A. And so everything is done, but closing hasn't happened. CPs are half-pay, CPs could have been satisfied. So we've not really reached the situation of dispute. But the challenges came in. I have a material adverse effect clause. Will the other party take shelter under it? Or I have a contract where the other party is looking at stalling things because they don't want to close, but I finished all the CPs. It's a cash flow situation. We need to deal with it. So it's technically not really a dispute, but it was parties waiting and watching to see where the scenario goes. And then using clauses in a contract to probably either use it as an excuse to not perform, or to stall proceedings, etc. So it was not really a dispute in the sense of a failure to perform or the inability to perform. It was more that we have a lockdown, we have a scenario that we don't know. We don't know where our life is going, so let's watch. Now, in a scenario like this, where it's not really a conflict or a dispute, parties still need to try to figure out how they can move forward with it without probably disputes getting built into it. So, I think even at those stages, sometimes parties are not able to correspond effectively through negotiation. So even though there's not a pure dispute, I think mediation still can play an important role. And we know, people like investment bankers have been trying to act as mediators sometimes, trying to get parties to reconcile and figure out how to take things forward. But in a larger transaction or in transactions where, it is a catch-22 situation where an investment banker might be stuck trying to take the transaction forward or look at how documents can be modified to deal with situations today, I think mediation can even play an important role there. In infrastructure contracts, so that's one leg of it, where you're talking about transactions. In infrastructure, the government has been very clear in saying it's a force majeure and therefore, you will have the benefit of force majeure. Now, unfortunately, in infrastructure, you don't have only one player. There are lots of contracts which have a back-to-back arrangement. but the contracts necessarily don't have the same language, which is a back-to-back arrangement. Now, will the benefit of those force majeure clauses be applicable to the person who is, at the trickle-down effect, who's the ultimate, subcontractor or performer? So those kind of challenges have also been coming out. That if I have a force majeure clause, but I'm not a government. Government is giving my employer the benefit of force majeure. Do I get it? Am I entitled to it? Now, those are again potential conflicts because I might get the headway, but my contract is drafted in a way that under that contract there is no force majeure. Do I still give the benefit? Can I create a dispute out of that? So those are the kind of queries that you really look at in terms of when I've looked at private equity M&A or infrastructure.
So, ma'am, so if as you suggest that, as you already suggested that mediation is pretty much useful in the current dispute resolution scenario. Now, what expectations do corporate clients have from mediation or for resolving their disputes? And can mediation be a viable option for them?
So I think for to figure out whether mediation is a viable option and whether it should be used, I think you have to get into the mind of the litigant. Okay, the litigants, there are litigants can be in, I would bucket them in two matters or three buckets. One is I want to win. It's pure that I'm in the right, you're in the wrong. I want to win. I don't want to engage in any dialogue because I believe I have a great case. Let the court decide. Now that's again a mindset issue. You have the second bunch of litigants which will come saying that I know I have a weak issue. I know eventually if it gets into disputes, I will probably lose. I want to stall or delay things. Maybe I don't want to look at a dialogue or something. Maybe I know that eventually I might head for a dialogue, but I want to use disputes, or even if the other parties initiated a dispute, I just want to stall things. I don't want to resolve because I know eventually what the outcome will be, and I've tried to deal with the person. It's not going to happen. So I want to use these disputes and the legal procedures which are available to my advantage just to stall things. So therefore, I don't want to engage in dialogue. The third set of parties are, let's try to resolve and move on. And I think that is where mediation really works, where you have a party who just wants to figure out, how do I move on? How do I get out of this? How can I move on? How can I figure out where my risks are? I take the risk call, I mitigate whatever I have, I accept whatever comes, and I move on. The first two sets of people require the dialogue to understand that if you're trying to say it is because I'm in the right and you're in the wrong, therefore it doesn't necessarily always work to your commercial benefit. Because in terms of time lag, and especially you see during the lockdown, courts have been closed, and even if courts open up, there's a gradual opening up of courts. So the backlog that will have to be dealt with, and you will not see courts functioning at full strength and full capacity for a while now. So in terms of time lags and delays, we have a wonderful wonderful history and wonderful reputation when it comes to delays in litigation. We'll see even more of that. Secondly, we've had things like in IBC. IBC has been now kept on a pause for a long time. So while they're saying 6 months, I'm sure we will see extensions to that also happening depending on how ground realities are. So what is your course of action? You can say disputes, I can say litigation, but when do I actually see the outcome of whatever relief I would get? At least now I can do a cost-benefit analysis, I can move on. And the cost for a commercial person, it's a cost-benefit analysis. It's not really about, am I in the right or am I in the wrong? My business has to move on. Yeah. And whether I get money today, even if it's a part of it, or do I get the full amount with interest 5 years later? Money in hand is always better than money technically on paper. Yeah. And if I'm looking at the second leg of people who probably say, I want to stall issues, but what is the price you might pay for stalling? Again, cost benefit analysis, because eventually businesses commercials is a cost benefit analysis. I might get a pause on disputes, but when it comes back and it'll hit me with interest. It'll hit me with a bang. And then we don't know how things are today. Tomorrow, I don't know how my position would be either. Would I be in a position to deal with the scenario assuming the courts do give a favor which is adverse to me? Will I be in a position to deal with it? Because the interest would be invariably compounded for the time lag that I've done it. So again, a cost benefit analysis. And that becomes very important for any corporate.
Talking about cost benefit analysis and saving time, Now, as you are also a corporate lawyer, now, do you think whether this is a time for major corporates to consider suggesting their clients or even corporate law firms and also other major corporates to consider amicably settling a dispute, of course, to preserve the commercial relationship and also save cost and time? And will our ADR system, the country's ADR system, see a rise in mediation, in remote mediation, and and what kind of corporate matters could be mediated?
So I think, when you talk about corporate matters, unless you're going into the IPC purely and you look at something which is completely, you have to only go to, go to enforce criminal action, or you're talking about even a corporate, it could be a public sector bank, etc., where you're talking about fundamental rights of individuals that really come in. I think almost every commercial matter can be resolved through mediation, because it is about dialogue, it is about people, it's about the commercial interest of the parties. And I think the minute you have commercial interest and there's not public at large which is affected by it, or it is not something that is purely in state domain, I think you could mediate it. So from the flexibility bucket, we have, I think almost everything which a corporate deals with can be mediated. Now, where we're looking at the ADR system today, I think our ADR system through statute, okay, is still evolving. It's there's a lot to learn. There's still a lot which requires policy changes to happen. Um, so I think while that is I think that is one dialogue which can happen parallelly, and that's a larger discussion of how we look at and how do we deal with whether it goes into, before you go to court, do you take on mediation? That's a separate discussion we can have. But I think as parties itself, you can always engage in mediation. There's nothing to stop you, because you're not bound by a court saying only if the court directs me do I need to go to mediation. Mediation is voluntary, it is self-determination. Parties can say, we need to resolve this dispute. Why don't we just engage in mediation? And once we engage in mediation, we have a resolution that we don't need to go to court. So you don't have to anchor yourself to court.
Ma'am, on this, do you believe that parties and to some extent even many lawyers are not aware that recourse to mediation can be taken at any point in the dispute? It's not necessary that you need a court on.
Yes, that I agree with you completely, because a lot of people, in fact, there are several lawyers who themselves are not aware of what mediation is about. And so I have this wonderful thing where one of our clients was actually engaged in mediation through somebody who was appointed by the court to mediate. And the lawyer who was appointed as a mediator really didn't understand what mediation was. He was just told by court, why don't you help them settle? So his definition was settling was actually barter. He's asking for so much, why don't you, do 50-50 and you sort of settle it out? And my client was really, he said, I'm not even going to engage in this dialogue. You either come back and you talk reasonably and we figure out what the issues are. But if you're going to tell me he's asked for X and you give Y, it doesn't work. So and therefore mediation failed.
And okay, and like talking about mediation, can you tell us with maybe a real life example or an experience? Like, how mediation can simplify the dispute resolution process for the parties and also for the lawyers compared to the other two modalities of resolution mechanisms? Now, I'm not talking about the disputes that cannot be mediated, that's difficult to mediate, as you spoke about, matters related to IPC, but other matters.
So I think the large issue which comes up, and the beauty of mediation, is process and the procedure involved. Now, if I look at litigation, when you're going to court, your procedure, process, forms, how you submit documents, how notices are given, is invariably codified. And when I'm talking about, and you're talking about cross-border, it will depend on, jurisdictions of different countries, and you need to comply with it. And your entire dispute, it can not, even though you have merits in the matter, can turn around on technicalities. A dispute can be, relief can be denied to you only on the matter of technicalities, irrespective of, the merits of the matter. So therefore, if you look at that, technicalities play a critical role in dispute resolution as well, if you talk about litigation. Secondly, it's very process driven. So you need to comply with, you know, things like you need to pay court fees. So there's a cost, upfront cost, which is involved. And if the dispute is very high, the court fees gets higher. So sometimes that itself can be, you know, a deterrent to somebody to litigate as well. Or if a parties really want justice, it's a very big deterrent for them to even go to court. Um, the third thing is the amount, volume of data you need to provide. So in terms of your written submission, so that's, and how you prepare your written submissions can also, you know, they can also have an impact on the merits of a matter. Because if you are somebody who's been meticulous about maintaining documentation, you probably have an edge over the other party. So again, it's not really on, you cannot talk about justice. It becomes about how your paperwork is. The second thing is, the third thing is, again, in terms of evidence, are you calling people? There's a lot of physical requirement of the parties. There's a lot of effort of the parties in terms of the process, about how much data you have to give, how do you collate the data, about the information you have to give, about how the information has to be presented. So that it becomes very heavy in terms of time and cost on a party. And some of these costs are not direct, they're hidden costs. It's a value of your time. Okay. It's a value of your, do you have peace of mind? Okay. Are you always worried about what's going to happen? When is the next date? Have I missed the next date? What happened at the next date? Has my lawyer informed me what happened at the next date? Okay. Do I need to be prepared for it? Why is it taking so long? You know, I had anticipated 3 years, but it's gone on for 6 years now. Okay. Can we not stop these adjournments? So those are all hidden things because they play on your mental health, which again is a hidden cost. We move to arbitration. Arbitration eases things out, but some of the underlying issues are still there in terms of it is still very document driven. You know, you still have to give documents and data. It truncates a lot of things. It makes it more flexible, but you're again dependent on the institution, because the institution has rules in terms of how you have to present your data, documents, and timelines again. And the second thing also on the arbitrators. So you're at the mercy of the arbitrators who will decide when and how the process has to be. The other thing is, while arbitration probably eases things out, but also becomes very heavy on the pocket for some disputants. And again, from a time taken to see the finality, you're talking about finality, it will take about a year. Okay, and that is excluding the time that you take for the initial reference and the first petition, etc. So you're looking at about a year and a half. And then again, once you have a final award, it's not that it's sacrosanct. It can be challenged again. Yes, you have limited grounds of appeal, but that gets into court. The minute it gets to court, you get linked into the first issue of how long do you actually get how long does it take for you to get your remedy? Yeah. So it delays things. Now that's when you come to mediation. Mediation, the large process is driven by the parties. The mediator might have a few, requirements in terms of, there's some mediators who don't want a brief. There's some mediators who says, give me a brief in a page. But mediators typically don't want to be bombarded with information which could cloud their judgment or cloud them into, helping the parties resolve a dispute. So they want to help the parties to understand the dispute by the parties themselves. So parties try to find the solution. Mediators want just enough information to help the parties start the dialogue. And a lot of people also say, mediators, I have a very technical dispute. It's on infrastructure. There is a dam that has burst. It's about height, weight. It's about, how the merit of the steel is. What will the mediator understand? It's a lawyer sitting there. The mediate process, again, can include experts. Parties can bring in experts to explain issues. And the mediator just puts questions across the party saying, this is what the expert is saying. Do you have a view on it? Okay, do you agree with the expert? Do you have something else that you would like to have a dialogue? So that even the expert is brought in. The expert is brought in not so much as the benefit of the mediator, but for the benefit of the other parties. So that the parties understand where each other are coming from. And including the time for a resolution. Typically, if it's not a very complicated matters, you could actually see a relief or a mediated settlement happening within a week. Or within about 6 to 7 sittings, if you're talking about long duration. So in terms of time taken to settle a dispute, it's quicker. In terms of, parties don't want to continue mediation after some time, they decide to go into litigation, they can always come back. They can continue mediation dialogue even while they take care of legal proceedings. I don't have to worry about missing a date in court. I can structure my things through, remote virtual means. I can do Zoom calls. I can even do it on the phone. So it's not even that I need to show my face for a mediation. I can do it on the phone. I can do it through, through Zoom and through Skype, etc. And in fact, now we're talking about, courts now going up and arbitrators now looking at online arbitration and mediation, litigation. But mediation, we've been using virtual techniques for ages now. It's not become, it's not been rampant in terms of, not publicized it, but I think mediators use technology a lot earlier.
That's true. That's true. And taking a cue from what you said, like for in case the parties feel that, I have a very technical issue, how will a lawyer understand my technical issue? And then you call an expert. Now, as a mediator and as a lawyer, do you think that, what is your point of view on lawyers and retired judges as mediators? Or can industry experts who are non-lawyers can also be good trained mediators and handle technical disputes?
So that's a very good question. So it's not your qualifications, your professional qualifications that you have doesn't make it is not really important in terms of a mediation, because mediation is a different skill set and a tool. So yes, I mean, so it's not that lawyers and judges only can be mediators. We understand the law, so we'll be able to find nuances or legal issues. And, if we find that a party has a weaker case, is not properly represented, we can at least guide them, not by saying that, you need better representation, but at least ask them questions on saying that, have you considered things? Have you discussed this with your lawyer? So that at least they can go back and rethink on their strategy if they need to. Beyond which we cannot push in. We can at least make sure that the settlement agreement that's finally undertaking, there are some fundamental things about the legalities that are taken into account. So I'll give an example. Now, if there's a settlement agreement which violates FEMA, or which if the parties sign up and they go and implement it, they will get into legal issues or legal hassles. Because, again, a contract or anything else cannot be enforced. Or if it goes back to the court pushes aside saying this on technical errors, there's a technical error in your settlement agreement itself, I cannot pass an order. Means you go back into trying to figure out how to settle this issue. So where issue could have been resolved without examining those issues then become a technical argument, which in a mediation is ideally not there.
That's true, but what I was trying to ask was like, can we also have non-lawyer industry experts as mediators, which will be can that be a better option? And for legal point of view, the parties can get their lawyers along with them for mediation, and also maybe have a lawyer as an expert.
So and in the beauty of mediation is you don't need to have one mediator. You actually can have co-mediation. So you can actually have a mediation by maybe a lawyer and a technical person as well. So that and that's again parties' discretion. It's completely parties. If parties feel that, my mediator is a lawyer, but I also want a technical person, not just as an expert, but a technical person to answer me, or, to ask me the relevant questions, or to take to help us figure it out. The parties can say that we want two mediators. So that also helps. A technical person also can become a good mediator. And there are several technical people who are fantastic mediators around the world. So you don't need to be a lawyer. It's about understanding the skill sets. And if for a technical mediator, if they believe that the contract needs to be vetted by a legal person, they can say, while this is okay, but I want, a sign off from both lawyers saying that this works in the legal system and it's a properly validly enforceable solution which is there. And I want to sign off from the lawyers as well. So there are ways you can also do that. It's just that you need to then look at, like, if it's a lawyer, they need to rely on the strength of an expert who's technical, if it's a sole mediation. If it is a technical person who's a mediator, they might need to rely on somebody external from the legality of the final settlement agreement.